Welcome to the Venue Owner series of the Venue Success podcast. This season is all about connecting you with venue professionals from all across the country so you could hear firsthand the lessons they've learned, the highs, the lows, and everything in between, and what's actually working and what's not, which sometimes is just as important. So today I am joined by Scott Davies, a dear friend of mine and owner of Ridgefield Weddings in Arcata, California. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Great to talk to you, Tirzah. Happy to be back.
Yeah, so like you said, Scott was actually my fourth guest on the show right when we started. So I had messaged him saying it would be so fun to do a follow-up to our original conversation because so much has evolved at Ridgefield in the last couple of years. So I'm really, really excited to dig into that more with you today. I really think it's an important thing for venues to see the evolution that does happen, because when you start out, the vision that you think that you want to have, the dreams that you have, they really do change as you get into the weeds, you produce weddings. And even as we talk about today, AI weddings, all-inclusive weddings, um, that you learned things as you do work with vendors and you kind of figure out exactly how you want to customize the packages that you create. So we'll get into that for sure. But some fun little facts about Scott. I actually got to go to see his venue about 14 months ago, which was really awesome. My husband and I went out there, stayed on site, and Scott has donated about 80 acres of beautiful redwood forest on his property to conservation. He's really passionate about preserving the beauty of the property all around Ridgefield. But also, we went on a nature walk one morning, and I was blown away by Scott's wealth of knowledge just about the history of Arcata and the ecosystem that makes that sweet little town so special. And I just love that about you, Scott. And Krista, his wife, is also equally passionate about nature, and she's the one that keeps their venue so beautiful. And she's a lover of all things outdoors and getting her hands dirty. And she's really an incredible human as well. Sorry that we don't have her on the show today, but before we get into all of that we have for you today, you know what time it is. It is time for crazy stories with Tirzah and Scott, because people have lost their minds. So tell us your story, Scott. All I know about the story is that it happened. What was the last wedding of last season? Is that what you said?
It was actually one of the first weddings we had of this season.
Of
And I
this
think it's
season. Got
something,
it.
yeah, I think it's something that I'm sure it's something that all venue owners deal with at one point or another. And I feel like what's special about this story isn't the problem, but how my team found a resolution. So we had a couple that was getting married about 2 weeks ago here at Ridgefield. And when the mother of the bride showed up, it was obvious that she was intoxicated or somehow not fully sober at 11 in the morning already. So we have microphones, radios. We communicated with the whole team, let the bar know. She was okay at first, got steadily louder and louder. Could tell it was making other guests uncomfortable. This is not an uncommon thing at a wedding. Things really hit a crisis point after speeches, because that's when we discovered that the couple knew that mom had some issues, and so had made sure that the mother of the groom would give a toast, but the mother of the bride would not be allowed the microphone. She had a full-blown meltdown after that, and was in some ways justifiably upset. The thing I want to note here is that what would have been great is if the couple had let us know any of this ahead of time. Afterwards, when we were doing a post-game breakdown with them, they said, "Oh, we didn't want to put this all on you." And the thing is, as a venue owner, it lands on you whether they tell you or not ahead of time. Anyways, we were stuck with, on the one hand, trying to maybe move this guest towards getting a cab, and on the other hand, really preserving the day for our couple. And I spoke with a family member and said, hey, mom is heading towards a cab ride and being 86th from the bar. Um, can you help us? And the family member was like, not my job. So that was really no help. We were, my at this point I had left the venue and our day of coordinator team was managing this. The bride made clear that if mom had to leave, she did not want to be at the wedding anymore. And at the same time, a lot of guests were getting increasingly uncomfortable with mom's behavior. And so what was really special about this and encouraging as a venue owner is my evening coordinator rallied all the bridesmaids. They told the mom that she was getting an incredible send off and the rest of the party was going to be right behind her. They had all the bridesmaids line up in like a tunnel of high five. And they basically high fived mom and cheered her all the way into the back seat of the cab, got her off site. Daughter bride was happy with that outcome. Mom got off without feeling ejected. And so what I loved about that was the creative approach to a problem that seemed like it was going to be headed for a disaster one way or another. So that's my people who've lost their minds story this morning.
That is absolutely wild. You know, when we do final meetings with couples, I often will actually ask them, are there any family dynamics that would be helpful for us to know, as we are the ones, you know, moving people around? And I'll even sometimes, they'll bring up, oh, well, Uncle Joe is an alcoholic and we need to look out for him. Like, tell your bartenders about Uncle Joe, and it's amazing how much peace it gives the couples to know that we are aware of that situation. Now, I never want to take the responsibility for blowing up someone's wedding. So I think the way that your team handled that, Scott, was really great, especially when it's a mom, right? Maybe she's paid for the wedding, you want the bride and groom, or, whoever it may be, to be the ones responsible for taking that maybe difficult news to someone that needs to leave a wedding, whether it be a parent or an aunt and uncle or just a regular guest at a wedding. It's You have to be really careful how you handle those situations, because you don't want it to reflect badly on Ridgefield either, or any venue. So well done.
Yeah.
High five to your team. I know who your team is, and I'm just like, all right, snaps, girls, way to
Yeah.
go, way to go.
Yep.
Scott has a great team.
The sensitivity involved in creating that
Yes.
solution was an A+ result. So
Yeah,
all's well that
for
ends well.
sure. For sure. And you have happy clients that left, and, that could have been something that could have soured that whole entire probably perfect experience with them up until that last moment. It's amazing. They could have a perfect planning experience and you make one maybe unwise decision right at the end, and it could have altered their whole perspective of Ridgefield. So
Exactly.
that's really, really well done for your team. But all right, let's jump into things today. So Scott has a background in engineering. He is a deep thinking human. I'll say that. Scott thinks analytically about everything, and I love that about him. He's lived on this property for 20 years. He's raised his children there. And when they decided to transition this into a wedding venue, he really had a heart for people from all around the country being able to experience the beauty of the redwoods. And I think that that's something really special, because there's a lot of people that, will travel from all around the country just to be able to go experience the redwoods, but to be able to have a destination wedding in the heart of that, surrounded by that, the beauty, the enormity, just, oh my gosh. He knew he had something special, and they have a ceremony grove just literally wrapped in redwoods, and it's truly incredible. So be sure, if you're listening to the show, go to the show notes, follow Ridgefield Weddings, and you will be absolutely blown away. But Scott is a lover of education, leadership, and he is always trying to find ways to not only grow his business, but to grow himself as well. And I truly believe that is one of the uh key parts to success is being not being arrogant and being willing, being humble, being knowing that you don't have all the answers, knowing that it's a continuous growth process. And yeah, so I am so impressed with how Scott and Krista have run their business, the team that they have. They're doing such a great job. So Scott and I met a couple of years ago at the Wedding MBA. Maybe 3 years ago now. I can't remember, but several years ago we met, and he was right at that pinnacle point of wanting to transition from just being a venue only space to all inclusive. And obviously, that is my passion, and so we started working together. He was actually the very first venue that I kind of copied my business model onto his. And it was a really fun process for us to do together. And it's going really, really well. And I'm excited for him to share about that with you guys. Um, but, with Scott, like there was such an evolution that happened throughout that process, even with team, with vendors, with all of that. So we're going to kind of open the doors a little bit to Ridgefield and what's happening, what has needed to change over the last couple of years. And hopefully, this will be a really helpful episode for you guys today. So, question number one is just starting kind of back at the beginning. Why did you choose to have an all inclusive venue? And how do you feel like couples, your ideal couples, are responding to those packages?
Yeah, that's really the central question for Ridgefield, and there's a number of answers that really fill in the blanks of why transition to all inclusive. I think first and foremost for Krista and I, we had run Ridgefield as a venue only space for a long time, and that went well enough. We were busy with other work at the time, so it was okay. But the one of the pieces that was always frustrating is that everything that happens at Ridgefield reflects on us, whether we have a hand in arranging it or not. And so when we were doing venue only weddings, there would be times where someone would choose. I always throw Uncle Joe under the bus here as a caterer. Uncle Joe did the catering. He'd never catered a wedding before. It was a disaster, and guests were saying we went to Ridgefield and the food was horrible, even though we had nothing to do with arranging that. And we realized that the only way we could have and present the team of vendors for our couples that were going to hit the same bar that Krista and I set for ourselves is if we assemble that team. And so it was right, really, as we were wrestling with that basic equation that we connected with you and started exploring that AI all inclusive model. And you were able to help us understand that not only would it give us better control of quality and the vendor experience for all of our couples, but that there was really a path to stronger revenue by onboarding that model, which has absolutely been the case for us. I think the third piece, which we didn't fully appreciate when we started implementing that all inclusive model, is the fact that we are primarily a destination venue. So we have couples coming from across the US, and we've had during the last season guests with us from Jamaica, China, London, couples from New York, Florida, Seattle, Los Angeles, really across the country, Texas. And so for those couples, they don't have any idea where to start with vendors in our area. And so being able to really help them with every detail of the planning, including presenting to them vendors that we've already vetted, helps bring them across the bridge from a dream of getting married in the redwoods to something that feels like, with very little stress on their part, they can pull together an incredible experience for them and the people they care about most. while traveling to the redwoods, and that
Yeah.
the combination of all of those is really, for Ridgefield, an incredibly strong foundation on which we've been able to build
Mhm.
our success as a venue.
Yeah. When I was learning about your venue, you had used words like luxury and destination wedding venue with me. And that was one of the big reasons why I felt very confident in you guys transitioning to all inclusive, because it's really, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's really a big challenge to market yourself as a luxury venue without vetting like high level partnerships as well. Because Scott and I were chatting about this yesterday actually, and just like, you can't have this high level um and not just high level experience on the day of, but like all throughout the planning experience, right? You can't have this, your day of coordinator or the in-house event planner that I know that you have at Ridgefield doing this exceptional job. They're taking care of these like luxury type of clients, and then you have some vendor that they're working with that is just not up to that same level. You really all have to kind of rise together. You have to have that same level of expertise with everyone on your team. I think that's really important when you market yourself again as destination. These people, they don't, you're right, they don't know vendors in your area. They're really wanting that more, you used this word yesterday, concierge type of experience at your venue. So I think it is really important that to me, it's almost mandatory that you have to have those really high level partnerships that have been vetted. It's really important. One of the things that I've seen, Scott, that is a challenge for all inclusive, I've talked about this on the podcast before, is just the term all inclusive almost means nothing anymore. And it's frustrating for those of us that love the model so dearly, and I teach the model. It's tricky because I've seen, blows my mind, people use that terminology and all they have is the venue, tables, and chairs. Wait, what? How is that all inclusive? And then you have people that are more likened to you and I, where it's like you could come and get about 95% of everything that you need in a one-stop shop. And so how has that been a challenge, or has it been a challenge for you as you're interacting and educating your potential clients as they come tour on kind of what all inclusive means for you? Have you run against any challenges with them understanding your offerings?
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's, I think it's something that everyone who's trying to implement an all-inclusive venue model, a true all-inclusive venue model, struggles with. And as you said, it can mean we have chairs, or the more comprehensive approach to planning where we have planning in-house, we have vendors that we've pre-vetted. It's an incredible amount of work to assemble the team of partnerships, of vendors that are required to actually present a truly all-inclusive experience to couples. And I would say to venue owners who are considering it that, like, eyes wide open, it is a lot of work to go through
Mhm.
that business development and really create those relationships and partnerships. But it is not only absolutely worth it because of the experience, but another thing is that it's a differentiator. A lot of venues don't do that because of the heavy lift at the beginning. But once you get through that, you're presenting something that is truly different. So being able to have an all-inclusive venue experience is something that not only is something our couples appreciate, but that really sets us apart when they're looking at other venues. I think one of the things to keep in mind with all inclusive is that it's such a highly searched term that we know we have to include that description in our website and how we talk about what we do, but we have to also have an additional follow-up in person when we're doing virtual tours. In our FAQ section of our website, there's a lot of different ways in which we help spell out for couples, what does that really mean? And when they're interested in it, it's not only an opportunity for us to explain to them what they get as part of that all-inclusive package. But just the process of communicating that value to them helps them understand that we're gonna really listen to what their vision is, and it gives us an opportunity to do some storytelling around how we pull our resources together at Ridgefield to make their vision come true. So it's it's a challenge, but in that challenge is also an opportunity. And so I'm trying to keep both of those in mind whenever we're talking about what does all inclusive mean.
Mhm. And, I have to just say that even inside of the all-inclusive, we know that we include lots of different things, but there's also different ways to present all-inclusive. So just 30 seconds here. The two main ways that people do all inclusive is, you can have a flat fee. Say it's $20,000 and it doesn't itemize out everything. Like I'm paying $1,200 for the DJ. I'm paying this amount for the catering. It's just like, here's your flat fee for 120 people, whatever, and take it or leave it. If you don't want the officiant, I'm not changing it. This is just what our package is, right? That's a very, very simplified way to do all inclusive. What Scott has created and what I tend to lead people towards is a little bit more of a transparent approach to that. I feel that a lot of luxury clients appreciate this. And I think that you would agree with me, Scott, that they're able to see kind of the breakdown of what their full wedding kind of can look like. And I think that that's, to me, that was always really important because if they came to me and said, hey, I actually have this baker that's made every single cake in my family for the last 25 years, whatever. I don't want to be the person to say, no, you can't do that. I want to have a format in which they can easily, take that out of my inclusions or whatever, and bring that trusted vendor in, knowing that they're taking full responsibility for that vendor. And so I just want to kind of lay that out quickly because there really is those are the two main ways to do it, where it's like you have the itemized approach to building kind of the building blocks of it, and they get to build it with you. Scott and I were talking about this as well, that people like to feel that they have some control, and so you're trying to guide them in such a way that you really have all the control, but they get to make their special selections, and they're able to meet with the florist and tell her, the specifics and not feel like there's some cookie cutter situation. So I just felt like I wanted to pop that in there really quickly. But I think when I was building the packages for you guys, Scott already had worked with several people. And to be honest, Arcata is a small town. And so it's not like Charlotte where you could, every time you turn around, there's another baker or another florist or another, whatever. And so the pool of people was great, but in terms of quality, but not quantity, I would say was a bit of a challenge. And so we built out the packages and he selected the vendors. We vetted them, had great conversations with them. And over the course of the last year and a half, some things have needed to adjust. So I'm just curious if you could talk to us a little bit about how these partnerships can sometimes evolve and how do you know when you need to make a strategic change in one of your trusted partnerships?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I just want to double down on what you said about the all inclusive approach doesn't mean cookie cutter weddings. And I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
common misconception. There are fixed components, costs that are fixed, like the DJ,
Right.
but there are also a variety of vendors who have packages, and the final cost really depends on what the bride and groom choose, and that's where they get to personalize it. So articulating that journey to them, it is really helpful to get them to understand the basic sense that every couple is different, and so every wedding is different. And as far as having that the entire team that stands behind and with Ridgefield when we put our weddings together is there's a variety of different pieces there. One is our Ridgefield staff. So our direct immediate team are Ridgefield employees. Those are the ones that we have the deepest connection with and that are, we have the strongest working relationships with because we're all part of the same team. Outside of that, we have business partnerships. And, you know, one of the things that we've had to go through is transitioning some of our business partnerships. And the tricky thing about that is especially when you find the need to transition some of these relationships, not necessarily because there's been a problem or a breakdown per se, but because, like for Ridgefield example, we had some partnerships that were incredibly important for us forming our business and getting where we've gotten 0 to year 3, and we're starting our 4th season right now. But Ridgefield as a company has changed a lot in that time. And so recognizing that sometimes you need to find new partnerships that meet you where your business is as it's changing, but also that you feel have the ability to grow with you as you look forward to the arc of business development that you're aiming for. And so we've had to, pursue some of those changes, which can be, in some ways I think they're more difficult when they're driven by growth than a clear problem. That transition decision is maybe a little bit harder to make, but I think it's also important to, when you understand that your business has grown in a way that really requires new partnerships, that you make that change, just knowing that that is a basic fact and not really feeling a need to map out what every step along that change pathway is going to look like. That's something that we've had to navigate. Outside of business partnerships, our vendors really have a huge direct customer facing impact on our couples and their experience. And so I think really, really carefully about those vendor relationships and what is a good vendor, what does that really mean? And so for me, what I do is I have a combined mental score that I'm assessing vendors, and it's really made up of two separate pieces. One, obviously, is that they're superb at whatever their craft is, whether it's
Uh-huh.
photography or florals or whatever their specialty is. But the other part of it that is equally important or more important, in my experience, is the business communication part. You can have someone who is the best photographer on the planet who's really poor at communication, and that is going to translate into a poor experience for your couples. And one of the reasons why we see that especially is because there's a sequence here. Our couples experience our vendors solely through their business communication skills for the first year or year and a half of their planning experience with Ridgefield. They're not having photographs taken the whole time. They're not having desserts baked for them the whole time. It's all based on that interaction, that communication, the listening and response. And so that business communication is so important because it sets the stage for the couple actually experiencing the craft of whatever that vendor does, whether it's photography or desserts or DJ or what have you. And when they have a really great experience communicating with our vendors leading up to their wedding, it sets them up in a really positive way to experience whatever the craft of that vendor is. And conversely, we've had vendors who I would rate A plus on their craft, who are not A plus on their communications, and it sours that experience for couples before they even get a chance to experience the craft. And so it's a combination of both of those. And as as a venue owner, part of my job is to make sure that the work of everyone on the team is hitting the same bar, because if someone's underperforming, it reflects on everybody on the team. And so, accountability is important there. And that's the way I think that through.
Yeah. So I know that you recently had to make one of those changes. How, without getting into maybe too many specifics of it, how did you go about making that vendor change? Because that is a pretty big deal when you're a luxury all-inclusive venue and you have to one of your core vendors needs to be changed. Um, how did you go about doing that? And is that person going to finish out like weddings that you already have on the books? Like, kind of pull the curtain back a little bit for us and talk about what you're doing with your current clients too.
Yeah, it's tricky, and it's been a situation that's been ongoing for a year. So the business communication piece is in part with our couples, yes, but it's also with my event manager here at Ridgefield, that the communication has to be smooth and timely and professional in both directions. And so we've repeatedly reached out to this vendor and said, "Hey, we love your work, and here's where you're falling short. Here's where we need you to do better. Is there a way that we can help support you in this? If you want to come meet with us, we can create a different system. If there's a way communication wise that meets you more, where you're comfortable communicating, and just a number of times of outreach, and then things would get a little better and then they would fall off again. And the final straw for us was one of the first weddings we had this season. And the morning after the wedding, we had the parents who had paid for the wedding who were coming by to pick up a few remaining items. And they were, just relaying generally what a beautiful experience they had, how they remembered the venue tour and what I had, the vision that I had sort of created for them of how this would really turn into a beautiful day for their family. And they were just saying how gratified they were and what a wonderful experience they had at Ridgefield. And I said, it's how important it is for us to hear that, but that what would matter even more is if they could leave us a Google review and let other couples who may be looking at Ridgefield know. And that was when they said to us, "We will do that, but the one review we won't be meeting is for this particular vendor." And that was the first I had heard of any problem. And I said, "I'm sorry to hear that. What happened?" And they went on to relay just a whole arc of poor communication, ignored communications, snippy responses. And so, having had this year's worth of back and forth with this vendor leading up to this, in and of itself, it wouldn't have been enough to part ways. But I feel a really strong responsibility to everyone on my team, all the other vendors and my staff who are working so hard to make sure that if there's someone who's either unwilling or unable to row in the same direction with us, that I make that change to make sure that that doesn't happen. And so
Uh-huh.
I worked with our event manager to think through, okay, how many weddings has this vendor confirmed? Where's the cleanest place to make a break? And
Mm.
I just
Mhm.
decided that the cleanest place to make a break was right away, based on the fact that I didn't feel like I could afford to have any more poor experiences from couples with this vendor. So we talked to some other vendors in this same category that we had talked to before but didn't really have space for, and one of them was ready to jump in. And one of the things to keep in mind in these moments is that it's easy it's easy to have a hesitation to jump into something that feels unknown when you're a business owner. And there's a certain inertia there. But there's always an opportunity. Whenever there's a problem, there's always an opportunity, not just to solve the problem, but to make things better than they were. And so this has definitely been that experience for us. This vendor who's stepped in to fill the breach has excellent communication skills and is solid A in the craft end. And so for me, the internal score there, and especially the experience that my event manager is having in the fluidity of communication with this vendor and that our couples are having, it feels like it didn't just fix a situation that was suboptimal for our team, but that
Uh,
it actually improved everything. And so it's just a reminder that when you need to make a change, don't be shy, do
yes.
it quickly and
Yeah.
cleanly, and
Mhm.
remember that there's an opportunity in that that you're going to make your entire organization stronger and the experience for your guests better.
No, it is so well said. I think about, when we bought our venue, a lot of the original people were hired by my mom. And there was like a fracture in some of that relationship, and the way that they communicated with one another was unprofessional, to say the least. And it took some time, and I'm saying this on a purely like internal way as well. Being the person that's interacting with these people on almost a daily basis, right? To have a team of people that have your back, that are appreciative for the gift that you're giving them. And I say that truly because we spend, right, Scott, thousands of dollars a month on marketing, SEO, Google ads, all of these things that we're doing, even salespeople to sell their services for them every single day. When I feel that that gift is not appreciated, it's not like I'm even like wanting too much. Like that's a pretty low bar, I would say. Like just be appreciative and responsive. As a business owner, I mean, that seems like it should be obvious, but it kind of blows my mind how easily some of these vendors can, or I should just say these strategic partnerships, right? They really are partnerships. How they can become a bit entitled, how they can just I don't know, they just don't are, not grateful for the partnership, and I think that when you start seeing signs of that, that's, like, something to keep an eye out, and you did that, Scott. You saw that something was happening, you brought this person in, you gave them an opportunity to correct, and when you said that, I just wanted to highlight the fact that I always would do a yearly check-in at the end of each season with my partnerships, and that they knew that that was a chance for me to give feedback. And sometimes they would come in and they'd be like, it was like them going to the doctor and they were afraid, even though I'm warm and kind and all that, but they knew I'd be honest because it was important for me that we maintained that open communication about my expectations for how that they would communicate. And the kind of the second piece to that, I just want to say to listeners is that we actually had a document. We gave this to Scott and his team, a Google document with every vendor that each client has booked, and like say the florist has a column that they get to track all of their communication with that client, right? So if the florist sends an email or has a phone call, they just pop it in the Google sheet, chatted with them on May 26th, whatever. Then if they come to Scott and they're like, "Hey, I haven't heard from the florist. She's ghosting me. She's blah, 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 blah." Scott could pull up that document and be like, "Well, I see that she emailed you on May 26th. Maybe check your spam and see if it's in there." And there were some vendors that were really great about keeping that document updated and some that really weren't at all. And to me, I'm like, that's the only thing I'm asking you to do is to keep me apprised of your communication with them. If they're even unwilling to do that small thing, red flag, red flag.
Absolutely.
Because, uh,
Absolutely.
yeah, so it's just something to know that like we have to, as business owners, we also have to keep these vendor partnerships accountable. And a lot of us are kind of like kid glove with that. Like we're very afraid to keep them accountable, but you shouldn't be because they are a reflection of you.
You can't be, if you're going to run a business, you can't be afraid of that
Exactly.
accountability. And what makes the
Yes.
accountability easier is, first of all, starting with myself and keeping myself accountable to my team, leading off meetings by letting them know if I've made a mistake or something that I would have done differently. I lead with that to let them know what my accountability expectations are. But also, like, what makes that easier, keeping vendors accountable, is knowing that what I'm really doing is supporting the quality of the work of the whole rest of the team. And I should add really that it's few and far between. overwhelmingly, the vendors are thrilled with the relationship because they understand, wow, you're going to hand me 25 or 30 events a year where I have to do no sales, no marketing, no admin. I just get to focus on what I'm good at. So overwhelmingly they get that and are thrilled with the relationship. It's just the occasional, and this is the first one that we've had to actively part ways with. So
Uh-huh.
generally the team is thrilled, and so it's not like an ongoing problem. It's more like an ongoing awareness that you should always be looking at your team through that lens.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good. Really, really good. And I know a lot of you listening maybe don't do all inclusive, but I think that some of these principles still apply. You may, a lot of you have a preferred vendor list or creative partner list. You have people that are commonly at your venue. And a lot of people ask, like, what happens if I have someone and I kind of have an open vendor policy and someone's coming in and they're consistently doing a poor job, or leaving trash behind, disrespecting the venue. Like, I see that people are complaining about them. It is very, and I will say easy to um, not have those type of vendors coming to your venue anymore by one simple thing. So basically, you would say, we have this preferred vendor list. We recommend that you choose off of it. If you do not choose off of this list, you have to have any of these vendors approved before you book them. And so you don't have to publicly put out there, I'm not using XYZ florist anymore, or whatever the vendor is that you have to stop using. Because I personally had to do that before. You would just say everyone has to be approved. And if they happen to bring up this name, you say, I'm sorry to tell you, we've had multiple poor experiences with this particular person. So we do not have them at our venue anymore. And it is all offline and respectful. You don't have to share any specific stories with them. It's just like, I'm sorry, but we don't allow them. And never once did I have someone keep pressing to have someone that we said didn't do a good job. So that's just something to keep in mind for listeners too, that there's still some lessons to be learned here.
Yeah, real quick, what we said to our couples that were already in our pipeline that had already booked was, due to unforeseen circumstances, we needed to make a change to one of our vendor categories. This is the person who's going to be managing your wedding, made the introduction. So excited to be working with you. Totally smooth. And just wanted to echo what you said, not one pushback from one couple on that. They're like, great, good to know. Thanks for letting us know.
Right.
Transparency. So
Right. No, I love that. Yeah. So it's just the partnership, and that's why I love, like, I've said this in other episodes, that we call them like friends of the homestead. Like, I wanted people to know that these people that we were partnering with were genuine friends, that they were people that I stood behind. And when you get to the point where you're working with someone, Scott, and you're like, I cannot stand behind what that person is doing, you gotta not dilly dally on making that change, because ultimately it could have a long time negative ripple effect on your business. And
exactly.
sometimes that person might be relieved, if they're acting that way. Maybe they don't want that opportunity anymore. So you don't know what's happening on the other end of that situation as well. So, okay, I think that we will move on from this conversation, and I really want to kind of transition to something that I'm really excited to talk about. Scott, I don't know, was it maybe a year ago? He was like, hey, Tirzah, I think I want to build a pavilion. I spent like half a day. I don't know. I got so sucked in. I was using AI, doing all these renderings. I got so deep in the hole of, like, so excited for Scott to build this pavilion because I had been to the venue. We knew exactly where he wanted to put it and all of this stuff. And we'd had lots of convo. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's finally going to do it. But before we jump into that specifics, I just want to say one of the common pitfalls that I see, especially new venue owners make, is that they come into a space and there is just like unlimited opportunities for improvement, right? And we want to build a chapel, and we want to completely transform the bridal suite, and we want to buy all new dishes and do all of the things. And there's no small purchases when you own a wedding venue. There are no small projects when you own a wedding venue. And it's one of the things that we have fun doing because there's a clear uh beginning, there's an end. We feel like, oh, we could check this box. It's way more fun than digging into SEO or digging into perfecting our tours or hiring better
Insurance.
team, insurance. I love you, Justin, with nuptial, but
Yeah.
oh my gosh.
Same.
Thank God for you. Thank God for you, for your brain. I don't have to think about it. But yeah, it's just like very unsexy things, right? It's fun to do projects, but a lot of us get upside down. And when we're doing projects that are too big for what our revenue should responsibly handle, right? And so
Yeah.
I just want to highlight that before we jump into this idea. I want you to just share with listeners your dream for your pavilion, because just to set the stage a little bit, when you come into Ridgefield, you are going through this beautiful small town, you're climbing up a hill and you turn into this kind of this smallish driveway. You don't understand what you're getting in for. And all of a sudden you start climbing up the hill. You guys, the redwoods. Oh my gosh, if you haven't been to the redwoods, you must go. You must go. Anyway, and you come around this curve and all of a sudden it opens up into this meadow. I got chills. I get chills still to this day when I see their pictures. But there's this beautiful, like white colonial style house sitting in the backside with all the redwoods all behind. And it's just all green meadow at this. And there's, some nice patios and stuff, but it's so ripe for a beautiful place for the reception. And he has currently, up until this point, been using a tent on grass, correct? It was just on grass. And
Yeah.
so when
Yeah.
so we know that there was a space for a beautiful permanent structure. So I'll be quiet. You take it from here. Like, tell about how you decided to build that and why you decided to kind of do it in stages.
Yeah, there was a couple of things that were driving us in this direction. One of the things is just aesthetically, visually, when you pull up, the tent was blocking part of the colonial home. And so visually that was always kind of um a little bit, just like less than perfect. It was blocking the aesthetics a little bit. And so there was that piece. And then the other thing is that we were able to get all of our tables underneath our 40 by 40-foot tent, but they were in grass. And so not a perfectly level surface. And then dancing had to happen outside on our terrace garden where we didn't have coverage, either if it was an exceptionally warm evening or more often it's fog or a little bit sort of cool and drizzly in the evenings. And so there was a variety of different reasons why we really knew that adding a pavilion in the meadow next to the house was going to kind of pull the aesthetics together, but also provide a better guest experience. And so we started looking at that project, and, the full dream is a pavilion that's 50% bigger, so 40 by 60. That would allow us to have 150, 200 guests under the pavilion, as well as dance floor, DJ, satellite bar if we need, and a permanent structure. But there's, we, we looked at this in phases. And one of the main reasons why we broke this project down in phases is because of what you were saying, which is just the capital costs. So the full-blown project is slab, permanent building, doors that we can shut, heat the building, etc. What we decided to do instead in phase one was we did the engineering for the concrete portion and put deep engineered footings underneath the slab, along with brackets that the posts will eventually sit in, and then just pitched a 40-foot by 60-foot beautiful pavilion tent over it. And this was, maybe 25 to 30% of the full budget. And that is, first of all, allowing us to spend money on this infrastructure project over phases. So that's super helpful from, a financial standpoint. But the other thing that is also super important with a project of this size to think about is that you don't really know how you're going to use it. You don't know how your guests are going to interact with it. And you don't know, like in our case, we had to add one ADA parking space with a concrete path into the pavilion, but we needed a path to the bar, a path to the parking area, a path to the restrooms. And we just really had to make our best guess with how traffic was going to organically flow through these different places. So we decided to just use crushed gravel that we packed down really tightly, knowing that if we needed to change something, we could do that easily. And the reason I mention that is that even at this early stage, we've done 3 or 4 events with our new pavilion. We're already learning things about how the pavilion is interacting with the existing components of our venue that are now going to inform what that final phase 2 and phase 3 of the project are going to look like. It's enabling us to make better decisions regarding how we make this permanent and get to that final full-blown building design. If we had gone straight to the finish line, not only would we have spent more money, but we would have been making choices that weren't informed yet by how our guest flows actually work. And so I have no regrets over doing it like this. It's been so important because not only, spending less initially, but equally important, the flexibility that we feel now in re-envisioning the space. We thought, for example, we were going to want to have the DJ station in one of the far corners, and it became immediately obvious once we started actually using it that the best place for the DJ is in the middle with the tables in a U around him. And so you can think in absence of actual observation, how this is going to work. But if you have a way to do part of the project and then use it before making the design get all the way to the finish line, I think it's really useful in allowing you to get a better end result than you would ever be able to do if you're making that decision before having a chance to see how the workflow and traffic flow actually unfolds.
Yeah, that exact thing happened actually at our venue. We saw, we put all these signs up, people first of all don't read signs, right? And we started to see that there was a traffic flow that they just kept cutting across this particular place in our grass. And I kept putting up more signs and trying to, put staff members out there and I was like, forget that. I got crushed gravel and I just made the darn path because I was so annoyed at them like trampling on my grass. And then I'm like, I'm spending
Exactly.
so much time and I just stop, like, just let them go across that area. They wanna cut across it. I'm just gonna make a way for them to do that. But, I just wanna say too, like, in regards to how do you decide if you're gonna make a big capital improvement like this, I want to caution people to make sure that this improvement is going to be something that will actually add to the sales process, will add to your revenue. Don't just do it because it's sometimes if you have extraneous money and you want to do something that's a beautification thing, that's fine. But you want to make sure that the thing that you're adding is something that couples are wanting, something that they're already asking for, that you know is going to make your venue even more attractive to increase revenue.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing that I would say here, and I think you're wise in this because some people don't want a tent. Some they just don't. They might eventually, this could be a big thing for you having a big, beautiful, permanent structure.
Yeah, that's totally right on. And the one of the seeds for our understanding that we needed to have a different infrastructure solution was questions that we would repeatedly get from couples, which is, what's the rain plan for dancing? And the
Which is
answer was,
real in Arcata. It's a real,
which is
real
real.
issue. Mm-hmm.
We're in the Pacific Northwest. We're right on, the Redwood Mountains crashing down into the ocean. We're in a rainforest. It's raining right now, and we can get rain in August. Generally
Yep.
from May to October is our dry season, but rain still happens. And so we knew that having a pavilion was going to it was going to allow us to say to couples, our plan B is better than most venues' plan A. And here's
Yeah,
how we're not concerned
exactly.
about the weather. And so what's been interesting to see is, of course, we have couples who have booked for this season that we're in now that booked before we had the pavilion. So for them, it feels like, wow, this incredible upgrade. And some of them, our first wedding of the year, in fact, the couple was like, we don't want the pavilion. Like, we fell in love with the terrace garden. We really want to dance in the terrace garden. That's why we booked your venue. And I tried to talk them through why the pavilion was going to be better. And ultimately I just said, okay, we'll do what we can, and we'll accommodate your vision. And we had our DJ and my team. We set up in the terrace garden in a small area by the bar so that the bride could have her vision and dance in the terrace garden. And 10 minutes into her first dance, it starts raining.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
we rallied the whole team. We moved the whole DJ system where? Under the pavilion, where she was able to have her dance out of the rain with all her people. And she came to us and she was like, we're so glad you have this pavilion. And she didn't see the vision. She experienced the vision in a way that was more meaningful than me trying to tell her why it was better. And so it's been gratifying to see the way that the vision for that logistics improvement is already
Yeah.
manifested here in some of our
Yeah.
first weddings.
Well, I can't wait to see the end result whenever that time comes. So I'm super excited for the things that are happening at Ridgefield. There's other things that we haven't gotten to talk about today. When I went there about 14 months ago, we designed a full wedding weekend package, and that went really, really well. Still continues to go well. So there's just so much that you guys are doing by listening to the needs of your consumers and trying to meet those needs. You guys have been tremendously successful, and I know that you will be for years to come. So, as we close today, I just want to ask you one simple but very powerful question. What is it that Scott is most grateful for today when it comes to being a venue owner?
My answer to that is I have two pieces to that answer. The first thing is I'm incredibly grateful for getting to see the experience of people coming to see the redwoods for the first time, because we have couples that have we had a couple from Austin, from West Texas last year who had never been to the redwoods, never been to the ocean. And it's not even so much the things they say, but the joy and magic that you see on their faces as they experience the venue. And what I love about that is that it keeps me in contact with how incredibly magical the redwood forest is. And it keeps me from getting just too accustomed and taking for granted the natural beauty we have here. So I love that. And then the other part is working with my team. And as proud as I am of the work that Krista and I have done working on the venue, I think I'm more proud of my team, our event manager, our day of coordinators, our vendor partners, the work of leadership there in pulling that team together, and keeping them pointed in the same direction, teaching about accountability, leading by example. That's enormously grateful. And the top part of that is the huge gratitude of having a wife who I not only love but love working with. That really makes that makes all the trudgery pieces really worth it, outshines all of those other pieces, and keeps us coming back excited for work every day.
Very well said. And I will say just that I'm grateful for you and Krista and your teachability. And I want listeners to hear this, that we all have none of us have arrived. I haven't. I'm still learning things every day. But I just want to say that I'm so grateful when I work with clients that have become dear friends like you guys, your willingness to learn from my mistakes and your willingness to um, kind of trust the process of having a coach has set you forward probably 5 years at least, and not just me, but other places and people, great strategic relationships that you have in your life. That is something that people should emulate for sure. Being teachable, being humble, being a constant student is really, really important. And I'm grateful as a coach that I've been able to just see the success that you guys have had at Ridgefield and will continue to have for sure.
We're lucky we found you, because for us, you've been the perfect combination of cheerleader and like the accountability buddy, who's helped us feel inspired, but also not afraid to tell us where we need to sort of shift gears or look more closely. And I think the trust that's part of that relationship is why our friendship has grown so much with you and Bradley, and we're really grateful for that.
For sure. For sure. Well, I wishing you all kinds of amazing success for this season. As we are recording this, it's the end of May-ish, and you're right in the thick of wedding season, I know, and lots of big transitions happening at your venue. So wishing you all the best in this wedding season. But thank you, listeners. I know today was a little bit of a longer episode, but thank you for, if you're still here, thanks for hanging in. Thanks for being loyal listeners, and thank you for being here, Scott. We'll see you next time on the Venue Success Podcast.